The best undercover fabricated identity is yourself. The best undercover fabricated identity is yourself. The best undercover or fabricated identity is yourself. It's you with all the inhibitions turned off and the volume turned up. The best undercover fabricated identity is yourself. More than method acting. This is method living. Welcome to the Nightcrawler podcast. My name is MadZack, and let's get into Miami Vice. Detectives as fantasist surrogates. Craig, what if I told you that Miami Vice is the most interesting American philosophy basically I've ever seen? What would you say?
I have no idea what that could possibly mean.
Well, we're going to get into it. We're going to deconstruct Miami Vice. It's going to be very fun, and thank you for being here with me. Well, I think it's best to start with my own experiences. I remember I used to live in Miami, did a lot of cool things in Miami, I guess. But Miami is just one of those cities that can essentially ravage you, kind of. Remember I went there and got a little bad into harder drugs, like heroin and stuff. But the city was beautiful. It was the beautiful backdrop to do it to. It was kind of not not trying to over sentimental. I'm not trying to be over sentimental or make this over romantic, but that's kind of how Michael Mann does his stuff. And Michael Mann, of course, is the executive producer of the show Miami Vice, and then he also made a movie version or a remake in 2006. And you were asking, how are we going to deconstruct Miami Vice? Well, Michael Mann basically did that for us with his remake. But I just want to just kind of make it known that Miami is a ridiculously interesting city, and Miami is the lead character of Miami Vice. It's really the central figure. It's its own universe. It's like a Kingpin Mona Lisa. And what Michael Mann does is he captures Miami iconography and makes them into just kind of symbolic, a symbolic refuge of philosophy. Miami as a as a religious place, or a redemption as a physical space. Detectives as crusaders are emblematic and called upon to do Miami's will. Miami is a woman so far as Michael Mann is concerned. Any of the city, you watch Collateral, Los Angeles is given the physicality and anatomy of a real person. But in Miami Vice, the 80s television show or the film, Miami is a woman. She's beautiful, alive, and she is careless, and she's a bruised, gorgeous, raped woman at war with herself, all of herself. War is what gives her sex appeal. It's allure. It's what gives her strength, independence, and mythology. She is a goddess, a very curious, self-absorbed, and ultimately irresistible goddess. You can touch Miami like a woman. She will trick, haunt, and love you like the best women in history have. Like a sun-tanned Cleopatra, she leaves you smelling of coconut and copper tone. She will trick, haunt, and love you like the best women in history. You would sack Rome for her. Miami is your omnipresent soul or my omnipotent guide. And Miami, in Miami Vice, or in Michael Mann's world, is an atlas of violence, complete with tokens or totems of a rich, deceptive past. Marauders in one-piece bathing suits, and the avenues of Miami all form these twisted constellations, the outline of an hourglass goddess, and you're lost in her atlas. A remarkable star system. Has her own fluid choreography. Everyone plays their part in her orchestra, and she plays us all. She has her favorite instruments, and she makes a symphony out of the people inside the city. And Michael Mann creates a symphony from that cinematic orchestra, and her hair flowing like a soothing sonnet, like sonic fireball. It's like Joseph Conrad as a neon Socrates. This heart of darkness is contoured by lust and ruined dreams, and the horror that Kurt saw in the Amazon is actually wildfire on Miami's immaculate shoreline. And so far as I'm concerned, Michael Mann is the ultimate philosopher of crime, and he's an artist of sophisticated violence. And Mann sees cities like no other filmmaker does. He captures them perfectly, and no one else sees this kind of magic, and no one else tries to capture it like that. He uses like Orson Welles inspired deep focus shots to make these skyscrapers of Miami the integral moving force of his images. Miami is what makes his images kinetic or moving in the first place. And let's talk about Miami Vice. Not sure how much you actually do know about Miami Vice, Craig. How much do you know about Miami Vice?
I'm just going to assume I don't know that much. Like, I know it through references more so than itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's been referenced. I remember watching Miami Vice, the show, when I was a kid, but I do remember the first reference that I actually got was in like Grand Theft Auto Vice City. If you got 3 stars,
I played the hell out of that game. So
if you got 3 stars, 6 stars, the army comes after you. 1, just foot patrolmen, but 3, these 2 cool dudes in like awesome like Miami suits pulled up in their Ferrari and started shooting at you. So 3 stars got the Miami Vice cops after you, which I thought was funny. But Miami Vice is centered around 2 policemen, Sonny Crockett and Ricardo Tubbs. And Sonny Crockett's who we're going to focus on first. Miami is his mistress. He really embodies all of Miami's qualities, or maybe it's actually vice versa, but he is loyal to her in every way. He has learned so much from being her lover, and being her lover just being a citizen or being a native of that city. And she's a deranged kisser, and Vice Squad is his function. It is his own value. He's a symbol of Vice Squad functionality, of efficiency, of policing an irresistible goddess. It's a template for all future cops, by the way, Sonny Crockett is. And he's evidently completely transparent, and he's also so reflective of his city that he's a mirror of it. Without Crockett, would Miami even exist? Or actually, how integral is he? Does she know that he's this important to the foundation of the city? Is he even important at all? Without Miami, Sonny certainly would disappear, vanish into thin air. But without Sonny, Miami would still be completely alive. He shares his bad karma with his partner Tubbs, and there's a line from the TV show actually, where he's asked, does he ever forget who he is from being undercover for so long? And he goes, I ever forget who I am? Darling, sometimes I remember who I am. And this goes back to Michael Mann saying that the best undercover fabricated identity is yourself, and the many lives of an undercover cop. And he tries to come off as strictly business, and he says, when it gets personal, it gets messy, and when it gets messy, the wrong people get killed. But, he cannot be bought. Miami owns his loyalties and moralities. It's not his to sell. The city gave them to him. He lives in a counterfeit universe that he needs to feel like a real part of, an authentic part of. Sonny lives on the edge, and he's in too deep, and like almost the other side of the ocean. Every fabricated identity is the same because it's him. It's all just different amplified versions of him, or true versions of him. It all fits when collapsed into the same lens. No matter how many lives Sonny collects, it's all the same one. He's falling. They both are, Tubbs and Crockett. Quotes like, probability is like gravity, and you can't negotiate with gravity. Everything must come crashing down, and Sonny and Ricardo are better criminals than the real ones. They are professional drug traffickers. They provide Miami with the cast of criminals it deserves. It's a place both holy and profane, and Crockett and Tubbs are both holy and profane policemen who are so iconic as undercover criminals, they reinvent the kingpin idea. Criminal iconography looks up to them. They are emblematic of a raw, romanticized crime that does not actually exist outside of undercover fetishes. So through Sonny Crockett's fetish with being an undercover, and by the way, through being an undercover policeman, he gets to actually be like his actual self, so far as I'm concerned, and that's kind of a fetish. And he almost creates the cool, the cool criminal. He not only creates the cool policeman, but he deconstructs the policeman while being an undercover agent to create the cool criminal as the flip side of that coin. And then we get like Ricardo Tubbs. Ricardo is a believer. He's less jaded, but equally dedicated. And fear is in him. He's actually afraid of Miami because he doesn't want, you know, he doesn't want to become it or become as intimate with it as his partner is. And Sonny understands that parts of Miami are beyond comprehension. They both know that you can never trust a word she says, that Miami is the queen of broken promises, but Sonny invests so much of himself into his roles, you know, not method acting, method living. His many characters are a part of him. And when a character of his is retired, say that the case is completed, the case is done, then a part of him is actually dead. That inhibition part of him is actually gone. Um, you know, Sonny invests so much of himself into his roles, like I said. I mean, the differences between his roles and himself don't exist because the best acting is just acting like yourself. And Sonny has accepted his fate, whereas Ricardo attempts to make fate and predestination have a romantic edge and comfortable lean that works at least in the favor of him being allowed to survive. He wants his sanity. For Tubbs, sanity means a slice of normality. Sonny is grays, and Ricardo needs a little black and white to keep rational, like an us v them and us v them like mentality. You know, like us v them. It's you're either with us or against us. And Sonny wars with himself by extension of his profession. You know, Tubbs keeps the definition of his trade clearly designated in archetypes that provide him with tactile efficiency of good guys and bad guys, whereas Sonny inadvertently creates war with himself when he makes himself such a gray, bad, good guy that is, and that the fact that that is a mirror of himself makes him a part of crime and makes him kind of self-hate. You know, self-hate by speedboat in a way. You know. But in the show, they need each other. In the movie, they need each other as well. But they need each other in the film version more in functionality than as friendships. There's unspoken deep truths. You know, they need each other because they are the only identifiable cog. Yeah, the only identifiable cogs in Miami's labyrinth atlas of multiple personalities. They know who each other actually are physically and emotionally. And in Miami, a relationship like that means you get to keep your sanity, and if Lady Luck is with you, your life. Florida's a mean goddess, and Miami has a pretty face and a body to die for, but do not die for her. That's what Tubbs and Crockett kind of have to remind each other. She would not do the same for you. She's homicidal, not suicidal. Self-absorbed, not sociopathic. Just to take like a bit of a breather, Craig, like who are some like cops that you like in movies or television shows? Like do you like any cops on there? And like, what do you think that they mean?
I guess off the top of my head, I would just go ahead and say Sherlock Holmes.
And I would actually completely agree with that. My middle name is Conan. It was actually named after Arthur Conan Doyle, the writer of Sherlock Holmes. And the most fascinating thing for me about Sherlock Holmes is that he's such a deeply flawed detective, but also, like I was just saying with Sonny Crockett being a mirror, being so reflective of his city that he's a mirror of it. You know, the only villain, I guess Irene Adler is a good villain too, but Moriarty on Sherlock is essentially just a mirror version of Holmes himself. So the ultimate villainy is just a reflection of the ultimate heroism in Sherlock, which that's what I've always found most interesting about Sherlock. It's like stories like The Final Problem or in the Valley of Fear that kind of focus on Moriarty and how he's the flip side of Sherlock's coin. I know here with Sonny Crockett we're dealing more with the city being like that, and the city is not like inherently evil, it's inherently mysterious, but Sherlock, it's very, I know I'm kind of might be getting off topic there, but like just to bring it back to another like similarity, you gotta love the Watson and Holmes relationship, just like the Crockett and Tubbs relationship. I wonder what it is about detective archetypes that you need to have that other person in. It might be like that sane, at least with Sherlock, it's that sane rationality.
Maybe it's the idea that Sherlock is so detached from the norm that you have to have Watson there as kind of like a grounding effect.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
That way the viewer, the reader, has something that they can project themselves on, and it's almost like they're Watson going along with Sherlock's crazy, stories.
When you read the books, it's all told from Watson's perspective. So, like, that is the reader's entry.
And even in the TV show with Benedict Cumberbatch in
which
it,
is fantastic. I love that show.
If I'm not mistaken, it starts off with Watson.
Yeah.
Not Holmes. Like, you meet Watson first, I believe.
Just like in the study in Scarlet, the actual book itself. I mean, they changed it to him writing a blog, and that each episode's almost based on one of his blog posts.
Yeah.
And that's all. I'm trying to think now of, Sonny and Ricardo. One's obviously more dangerous or more interesting than the other. That'll always happen. But I'm trying to think of one like that Watson and Sherlock dynamic where you're actually being told the story by the far more interesting character. And if that would actually just fail by concept, because you have to be told from a grounded perspective. Like, it wouldn't work if you told the story from Sherlock Holmes' perspective.
I almost feel like it wouldn't, because another thing that's really interesting about, like, the whole Sherlock-Watson dynamic is that you start to see bits of Sherlock bleed into Watson.
That is cool, yeah.
And you almost feel like it's happening to you yourself as, the viewer.
Oh, yeah. And almost none of Watson bleeds into Sherlock. Because he has to be unchangeable.
Other than the fact that Sherlock does get a little more grounded. He's...
I mean, I guess that their function bleeds into him, like he has a friend.
Yeah, like he has something that he actually has that keeps him socially stable. Because
exactly.
Otherwise, he would just do whatever the hell he wants.
And I think it's just so fascinating, the detective archetype, and I think that Michael Mann with Miami Vice really just cracked into it, and it's all about this man design. He takes like neon or popular signifiers and embraces modernity with both versions of Miami Vice. It's an incredibly modern show, even though the remake has slightly ironic, more self-aware elements than the television show did, the film does. But still, it's all about cities as being independently romantic, naturally, / artificially splendid, like man-made Veronas that just tragedies abound there. Like, they grow there like fucking palm trees. It's like Rome or Colosseum crime cinema.
Almost like a building being a waterfall. Like that's almost the same exact. Like when you're watching a movie where they show a giant building, it's almost the same take you would take of a waterfall.
Exactly, but not too many filmmakers have that kind of eye for architecture. Can look at a building and go like, this building is emoting something. Like, we can actually pull pathos from this building, from the architecture. And man really lets a skyscraper speak for itself, maybe in a way you've never heard before, but that's just because maybe you were never listening. And in a Man film, crime is poetic, and crime and buildings both have something to say, and maybe the architecture is actually a reflection of the seedy underbelly of the city, or the architecture is a reflection of the crime that has built it. And the Miami skyline tells 1,000 stories, and these characters cash in and get out. Damnation is an efficient wave of permanence. Miami is an uncanny valley, that idea of like claymation becoming real after looking at it for so long or something. Like, it's an uncanny valley itself. It starts to feel vivid, real, although it is primarily false. And Sonny and Ricardo are parts of the uncanny valley. They add character to its naturally superficial color, both real and unreal, surrealist fresco anarchy in a way. Touchable and untouchable, dynamic contradictions, and man unearths hypnotic beauty in speedboats, streetlights, and palm trees, in neon shambles, cocaine confetti, laundered coins, and authentically romantic, tragic concepts of crime and order. It all, in a Man film, especially Miami Vice, feels so intrinsic, so contained, that Miami is your own private world, so complicated, so naturally and and quickly. Things get so complex or over complex so naturally and quickly that the end results can't appear to have lasting change or positive consequence. It's a never ending dance or serenade with crime, cop and criminal, undercover agent, and robust kingpin and twisted, gorgeous morality marriage. Redemption takes commitments these players don't have, so detective and criminal put their souls up as collateral. It's Michael Mann is caught in an Eastern trance as seen through neon-lit Western sunglasses. And, and the film version, I believe Tubbs says, like, this might be love, but she's with them, and that goes back to their us be them mentality. And you really get the actual physical feeling of luck run out. I'm sure we've all been to our wits' end. We're like, not necessarily emotional rock bottom, not anything else. It's really hard to explain, just making the wrong decisions. I make, chronic bad choices myself and to construct the world. That's what's interesting, because Miami Vice, a television show, constructed these tropes and staples that we're familiar with, and the film version deconstructed them. And to construct them, all you got to do is, like you said, align yourself with modernity's most unintellectually attractive features. Hint at concepts of iconography and an evolving process of self-sustaining interactionism, and amplify the most modern city that encapsulates the most modern anxieties in equal proportion to the most modern daydreams. It's not escapist, it's almost fantasist surrogate. If you're it's not escapist if you're drowning without realizing it. It's the opposite of escape, to physically and emotionally become your prison. Not that Miami is like a fortress, but she keeps a vigil guard. She doesn't want you to leave. You cannot abandon her, not completely. You cannot evade the pastel parade of gravity. Mann delivers fan service in the remake as well. All of a sudden, like, in the very first episode of Miami Vice called Brother's Keeper, and they have this really cool montage of Phil Collins, I can feel it calling in the air tonight, or whatever. They do that at the end of Miami Vice as well. But it's like a shitty, like, modern take on that song. But all of a sudden it starts playing. So Mann does deliver fan service, but in a most philosophically astute way that, like, radiates a sophisticated, self-aware energy. It's fan service as performed by Kierkegaard, or fan service as performed by Beethoven waxing poetic over counterfeit 50s. And the fan service itself heralds in the ultimate deconstruction, because the finale is all deconstruction. That final shootout, it tears the concept of Miami Vice apart. It stays faithful to film psychology while finally abandoning the 80s mythology in favor of a new contemporary philosophy. An intimate philosophy about dying several times at once while you continue to breathe normally. We watch Crockett die over and over without taking a single bullet. We watch him accept his fate, fated to live, in a certain color in Tubbs' pragmatic paradigm. The 4 of us are dying, the 10 of us are dying, all inside of Crockett, and he's not allowed to be himself. And Mann is the ultimate architect of cinema. He's the Frank Lloyd Wright of neon angles. He captured the city's true essence, and it's like Mozart. The remake, the 2006 version of Miami Vice, is like having Mozart return to revise his most famous piece, a juxtaposed, contrasted mishmash. You get a weird Nina Simone, like, I don't know, let's call it a remix or whatever, during the first 10 minutes of the movie. So right there, you're getting Michael Mann's self-awareness when it comes to stylistic iconography. And he captures Miami once again, but in a new light. I mean, people change, but cities don't really. Sonny and Ricardo have changed minimally. Miami has remained substantially the same. Crisis of identity. When you're having an identity crisis, Miami is your constant. It's in a neon urban stasis, it's about beachfront existentialism, the labyrinthine drug trade. It's a maze of trafficking. All roads, all oceans, all crime leads back to Miami. It leads back to Michael Mann's cinematic playground. Miami's overbearing, unemotive, depressing, and I watched it through a Vicodin rewatch, so I was like super high, and Miami just like opens her arms, and I like hold on to her. The movie makes Vice a job again. It's no nonsense, and it's unfair. Like, unfair things happen to these people, just like in any work. and it's a job no one should want to die for. It's a deconstructed metropolis. It's still functional, but geographically convoluted. Miami is now a city with too many moving parts and too many unknowns. Everyone's a player in somebody's score. Self-hate by speedboat. It removes the casino promise from the neon signs and lights. It's clockwork identity crisis. Tubbs says it's that time. The guns come out, killing. Oh man, killing the undercover personality. It's like suicide or homicide over and over again that Crockett and Tubbs take part in. Self-suicide, self-hate, self-reinvention. But Crockett's not very good at reinvention. He just becomes the same person over and over again. He's vulnerable in his criminal's costume. He killed himself like 100 times, all his selves, you know. And Miami, she is quintessentially, you know, sound and fury on camera, like a city slicker Faulkner brandishing a hand cannon. Michael Mann, his Miami Vice, both versions, when you compile them together, is quintessentially American philosophy. He's a quintessentially American filmmaker, and these are quintessentially American ideas. It's the shape of crime that never came, with like Billy Friedkin's To Live and Die in L.A., the great Willem Dafoe, William Peterson film. You get like the shape of crime that never came, you know, a Pulp Fiction or Ornette Coleman with Manhunter and To Live and Die in L.A., as well as Miami Vice. And Miami Vice 2006 is almost like the ultimate realization of that artistic concept or movement that never quite took off. And you can get quite a bit out of Miami Vice, and the concept of just, well, all the concepts. I hope I've made it sound interesting. I know it's fragmented, but Michael Mann has even said that the information on Miami Vice, the television show or the film, the information is characterized by fragments. There are implicit explanations, but you receive information in a fragmented way. Oh no, I don't know. I'm out of breath. Have I made Miami Vice sound interesting to you?
For sure. I mean, I would have never assumed that it could possibly seem that deeply. Like, with someone like my dad being obsessed with Miami Vice, like,
but someone like your dad probably hates the remake with Colin Farrell and Jamie Foxx, and that's what makes it perfect. Is you take the template, what he constructed, and then you get the remake version that takes those elements and completely deconstructs them.
Well, no, it's more along the lines. My dad's the type of person that would probably like it just because it's Miami Vice.
That's what a lot of people had a problem with the movie about, is that like it wasn't a whole lot like what they thought a Miami Vice film should be. It wasn't cheesy. It was really like a by the book, like crime film. I mean, if you look into it, Colin Farrell's Sonny Crockett is deeply fascinating in that movie, but you have to be like kind of philosophically inclined to look into it more. Because if you just watch it, it's just 2.5 hours of like a procedural. It's almost like anti-romantic, where the show is overwhelmingly sentimental and of its time and emblematic. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'd ask my dad, but my dad's been pretty simple about his taste in films. So with one of his favorite shows being this deep, he probably didn't see it that way. So that's what I was trying to get to.
Oh, and it isn't to minimize like Don Johnson's amazing performance on the TV show. I mean, that is 80s undercover cop. But Colin Farrell, that's just one of the best performances of his generation in that movie, and it's so surprising to come from Colin Farrell. I'm a lifetime Farrell fan now, because that was just an amazing role. He embraced Sonny Crockett the way I've never seen actors embrace anything else. I just want to point that out. And Michael Mann, my favorite American director. I've mentioned that on other episodes of the podcast before. This is the first time I really got the focus on one of his works, because there's so much to bite into. You know, auteurs come in many shapes. They don't have to just seem super pretentious to be overwhelmingly interesting. I find his concepts more interesting than Fellini's, Truffaut's, or Tarkovsky's. I find Mann just as deeply sophisticated, and what makes him even more charming for me, or more important, more integral to my life, is how American his sensibilities are. Like, like we understand those symbols because we've been raised around that iconography.
And it's also probably more approachable.
It is more approachable.
Which I've always said that you could have the greatest message in the world for all people to hear, but if you make it too complex, you use your most elaborate vocabulary.
Yeah.
Who's going to really understand it? Who's going to walk home with that knowledge?
That's the thing. Like Michael Mann never seems like he's trying to show off, like trying to be like, oh, look at this book I read, or like look at all these people I know. Which you do kind of get the feeling that way with certain art house films, especially like someone like Jean-Luc Godard is kind of like his movies. Vive-sa-vie and Contempt are amazing, but the bulk of his movies are kind of just, look how smart I am. I know that I'm going to piss off some people with that statement, but that's kind of what those movies are. As Michael Mann is the most approachable auteur in the world. He makes movies about criminals and detectives. His most famous movie is Heat, and it's probably his best movie, too. And it's just a 3-hour epic of just criminal versus cop. But they enter into all these amazing philosophical and psychological environments, and amazingly like cinematic and artistic like sensibilities and sensitivities that just kind of change your mind about what the crime film could be. It's just so incredible, and I'm gonna you're gonna watch Miami Vice, and the thing is you have to at least watch the first 4 episodes of the show and then the movie. So it's like quite a commitment. So that you could fully understand the complete deconstruction that he did and how courageous it was. And not a lot of people caught on. There are not a lot of people on that bandwagon. I still think your dad wouldn't like it because it's hard. It'd be like making a Batman movie, but he never puts on a Batman costume. They just call it Batman.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like the staples aren't there anymore because modernity is anti-romantic. Therefore, the film should be anti-romantic and not as emblematic as that. Whew! I think we could keep this podcast a half hour. I think we could cut off now. I think that was enough to get you interested in Miami Vice. Once again, this is a Nightcrawler podcast. Just be on the lookout for our sister podcast that's about to broadcast. It's going to be called Daywalker. And we're going to post some material on there. And so just check in between both of those. It'll be basically the same kind of content, but maybe eventually they'll become more like strategically aligned to fit certain topics. But right now, it's just a sister podcast. I want to thank you for listening to the Nightcrawler podcast, where we talked about Miami Vice for a half hour. Have a good one. Craig, anything you want to say to these nice people?
I guess I'll just say goodbye, and I guess check out Miami Vice.
Yeah, I can feel it calling in the air tonight. Oh Lord. Oh Lord. I'm an idiot.